Welcome to a series of videos called The Waterfall Journey. In this 7th video, we're going to explore how pain comes out of our experience as we journey through life. God's heart is so big that He holds enough love of different sorts to feed us. But as He created man and woman, He put different abilities to love in the heart of a man and the heart of a woman. For both, unconditional love and unconditional acceptance is part of the love that they can give. But from a man is especially able to give love that gives significance, gives self-worth. The love of a mother is about comfort and about nurture. What it means is that we need the love of both a mother and a father in order to replicate the love of the Father's heart. It means it's really important for children to have these different sorts of love in their life, because they draw different things from their parents at different stages of their life. If you watch a little boy who's 4, he loves to do what Daddy does. So he loves to have a set of tools and to be out there working alongside Daddy, banging in nails, screwing things up. And doing that, he gets a sense of significance from his father. That is really important. A dad is a really important role model for a young boy. For a young girl, it's really important in the teenage years that the love of the father, that special quality of giving significance and self-worth, helps a girl through from being a girl to being a woman. Mums are so important, aren't they? It's when you're hurt, it's to your mum that you run for that comfort and nurture. And so where people have not had parents who've been able to give such love, there is already in a person's life a deficit. We've said that most parents do their best, but what we're going to explore now is some work by a secular psychologist called Erikson, who saw that there were building blocks laid down at each stage of a person's development, from baby through to adulthood, which were important in order to provide the foundations for who that person would become and how they would experience life. Actually, Erikson starts with birth. The things that happen while we're being carried in our mother's wombs can affect our emotional health later on. I had a friend who came for some help, and she was in her 70s and she was suffering from panic attacks. She didn't know why, but these panic attacks would occur when there was loud bangs in her life. And as there was a building site just opposite her house, many bangs were occurring and she was suffering a lot. Now, this lady was a counsellor, so she knew a lot about her story and had done a lot about her inner life and had much restoration. So it was a real mystery to her. But when we explored back in her life about when there might have been times when there were big bangs in her life, the only thing that she could think of was that when she was being carried by her mum in the womb, her mother lived in Bristol at the time of the bombing in the last war, and that with all the men away, in the evenings when the raids would come, the single mums would take their children down into the shelters, and the atmosphere would get quite hysterical with the mums trying to keep their children safe as the bombers came over. And what we realised was that the bangs were bringing back those things that she'd picked up in the womb of the anxiety of her mother. Makes you pause for thought at the moment that in this world where there's so much war and trouble, where women are pregnant, for example in Syria, or one of the fleeing refugees, the emotional life of the mother is picked up by the baby. We are lucky if we are able to have a mum who is in a stable situation, both nationally as well as from a personal point of view, in order to give us a good emotional start. But of course that's not possible for everybody. What Erikson is saying is that these things remain with us as building blocks. Let's look at what he did. In this first side, if you have a look, the left-hand side is the building block that is a good foundation. So in the first year of life, Erikson's saying that either we're laying down a building block of trust or mistrust, and that depends on the way that we experience life. When a baby has been, and there's been a good pregnancy, and the baby has been in the womb, and then suddenly it comes out into the world, the first question a baby wants to know is, am I safe? Are big people okay? And you thought babies just lay in their cots. No. They are picking up information all the time. They want to know about this place they've come to. So what we see here, if the child, as we see on the left-hand side, is fed, is looked after, is nurtured, when baby cries, somebody comes, holds them, gives them comfort, gives them food, looks after their need. If they receive consistent care, the baby will think it's safe and can start trusting big people. And that building block of trust will go through life with them. If, on the other hand, they cry and nobody comes, if they need changing and nobody arrives to make them comfortable, if they're not fed regularly, if something's disrupting continually their life, then they will begin to think that they can't trust this world they've come into. These building blocks stay with them, and you can see that actually it's not just about intention of parents or those who are bringing up babies, but it's the circumstances that can have a huge effect on the way that they receive life. So consistent care is necessary. So how does a baby feel that he's loved? Well, it's about the way that it sees its reflection of itself in your eyes, the expression that you use as you look at it. It's about the tone of voice you use. It's about the way you touch. You can actually make a baby feel loved by reading a telephone directory to it. Oh, Mr. R.H. Jacobson, 342-5611. Woo. Babies need to feel loved. That love translates into this feeling of trust about the world that it's come into. I was in Serbia, and I went to a house group in Subotica, and there was a lady there who was very broken. And we talked about the needs of babies, and she realized that she had not had the sustenance and the nurture that she needed when she was very, very little. I came back a year later and went to the same house group, and this lady had been completely transformed. And she told her story that in the year since I had seen her last, that each day she would go into the local orphanages and she would sit and cuddle babies, talking to them, holding them, speaking to them, and giving them this love, this connection, this holding that is so important. A lot of damage can be done at this stage by people who are trying to do the right thing. In my day, the guru about childcare was a man called Bowlby, and he thought, in his wisdom, that the baby ought to be put in a pram down the bottom of the garden for 4 hours between feeds, and if the baby cried, well, you left them there. And I've dealt with many people who have been damaged by that. They have a sense of being abandoned and being disconnected because of what happened to them in the pram in the garden when they were very little. We need to take great care of our little babies, to bring them in so that they feel that there's that connection. But parents, don't worry, consistent care is good enough. And my story is that in this first year I received consistent care. I was born at the end of the war, and my father was away, still with the RAF, and Mum had my elder brother, who was 18 months older than me, and I was born in June of 45. Things were hard and things were difficult, but there was sufficient love. I was wanted, I was cared for, that in the first year I had a very consistent upbringing. But we're going to see what happens later on. Let's go to the first and the second years. In these times, Erikson is saying a good building block of autonomy. This means that when a child, a baby, is born, it is attached to a big person all the time. It's carried, it's looked after, it's held. In the years between 1 and 2, the child begins to get a sense of being a different person, of being apart from Mum. It's a time of exploration to find out where the borders are. This is why there's the terrible twos. It's not that children are being bad, they're exploring to find, where do you end and where do I begin? What can I do? They begin to make some choices for themselves. They begin to have a wider area. Being confined to Mum for the first year, now they need a space to learn and grow and move in and experiment with, to find out what happens when you open a jar and pour treacle on your head, followed by cornflakes. It's all a wonderful world to explore. And if those things are done patiently and kindly, then the little one is picking up the sense of being self-reliant, of being somebody special, of being somebody who is valued. If, on the other hand, the rules are not put in place in a kindly way, or they're inconsistent, the little person doesn't know what to do to be right. How do I please? And the way that we pick up messages when we're little is in a very subjective way. Little people do not see big pictures, they only see things that relate to them. So that if something goes wrong, what they will say to themselves is, what's wrong with me? Why isn't it as it should be? Now, when I was 22 months old, I fell out of the bedroom window and I fractured my skull. And I was taken to hospital, and in those days parents weren't allowed in. So I was put in a room in the dark by myself. I was strapped down in a cot, and I was there for 6 weeks. During that time, Mum and Dad didn't come. My experience was that I went from a warm, happy, trusting, loving place into the dark, in pain, on my own, abandoned. That was what was happening to me. That the doctors and nurses were doing their best to try and help me in those circumstances means nothing to me. The fact that my mother was standing outside the door looking in for most of those 6 weeks means nothing to me. To the little one, there in the cot, alone in pain, there was nobody. I learnt lessons in that hospital cot. I learnt that big people can't stand pain, because on the one occasion they brought in my mum and dad, I started crying and pulling against the thongs round my arms. And the doctor turned my mum and dad round and walked them out again. Big people cannot stay on pain. If you show pain, they're going to leave you again. The way that I read that was that if I was lovable, they wouldn't have left me. Therefore, I'm unlovable. And that was the big message that I took out from those 6 weeks in hospital. At one stage, I was waiting for a doctor to come and pick me up because he was the only one who connected with me. When he came, I needed changing, and so he wouldn't pick me up. He was cross with the nurse, and so when she changed me, all her anger came through her hands to me. The message I picked up was that I hate my body. But I also picked up anger that I couldn't trust these big people. So I made a vow there and then that I was going to abandon the world. I wasn't going to wait for them to hurt me. I was going to abandon the world. But the big thing that I picked up was shame, that I was less than everybody else, that I was unlovable, that I wasn't of value. So in 6 weeks, the little baby that went in was very different to the little baby that came out. What it meant was that if I came out and fell over and hurt myself, I'd be springing up immediately. I'm all right, I'm all right. I couldn't let the pain be felt, because if you let the pain be felt, the big people are going to leave you again. And so what you learn very early on is to bury pain. And the problem with the emotional pains that we pick up is that nobody sees the wounds. If you break your leg or you cut yourself, people will fuss around you. You'll be cuddled, cuts will be washed, legs will be splintered. You'll be cared for in a special way while those things are healing. With our emotional wounds, that doesn't happen. We're left with them, and we take them forward.